I wanted to touch on the idea of startups and culture. So I'm looking for a job at the moment, and I've started to look into my own habits in terms of the kind of jobs I take and the teams I join. I've always preferred startups because they have this open and fast culture. There's no massive process. We're not having, 10 scrum ceremonies. We're more customer focused. There's like a sense of the first thing you deliver really has to wow users. And so there's no, you know, corner cutting because it has to really be that thing that sells your company to people. There's also the opportunity to grow and to take on new responsibility because the company simply won't have a lot of staff for like release management or any of these kind of things. And so that's been my preferred approach for a long time. I've made a lot of friends working at startups because I feel that the culture is less corporate and less cliquish. But I find that what ends up happening is after 2 or 3 years, the company has shifted and it's no longer the same company that I joined. I think largely the reason for this is that startups haven't defined their culture or tested it against certain problems that will emerge as they grow. So some big examples I've seen in the past would be like a corporate client coming on and requiring all this governance and compliance stuff, and it becomes an overbearing kind of bureaucracy to work with. Or new hires who are very outspoken and very opinionated. They might speak over people, or if you criticize them, they might get very defensive. Or potentially the company goes into financial trouble, and then it becomes a case of, well, let's cut all the corners, deliver this. It doesn't matter if it's a good experience. We just want to say to the customer that we have it, so that they'll buy our product, essentially. And so a larger company has gone through the fire, so to speak. It's like we have this culture, we maintain this culture despite the fact that others might push us to drop it. I almost see it as like there's maybe 5 or 10% of companies that get through this intact with that kind of startup culture. Whereas most companies end up being this labyrinthine kind of mess of standards and structures and rules and all of these things that are needed to work through all these problems without really focusing on hiring the right people. And so culture is kind of a function of people. When you have 6 people, it's very easy for everyone to agree and to have a set of principles they stand by, particularly if you're very focused in your hiring. But when you have 60 or 600, you start to require more strict rules and more, corporate oversight in order to ensure that we're doing things the right way and that people aren't taking advantage of a system that gives them freedom. And so I'm sort of leaning towards maybe I should look for big companies that have a culture that I agree with, because that's more stable and it's more likely to continue into the future in a way that a startup's culture is much more likely to shift. And so I wanted to get your opinions on this. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot because I am looking at moving to a new job, and it's a concern I have going forward. It doesn't look good to have, hey, here's 10 jobs where I worked for a year or 2 years, as opposed to having one solid job. Recruiters would ask, oh, why is that happening? And it's always a case of, well, you shouldn't talk negative of your previous employer, but also, there are issues with, every company I've worked for, and probably every company I will ever work for. But I'm sort of feeling like it might be a good shift. So if you work at a big company that has like a strong culture, or you have done, or you've experienced something else, like a startup that got through these problems, I'd be interested to hear about it because it's something that's played on my mind a lot recently. Thanks. Have a good one.